Hello tacticians, in this video we are going to be looking at the newest addition for the Dark Angels and their final character, Forcas, the Inner Circle Companion. As always, thank you to everyone who supports the channel, whether it's through subscribing or use my friend code, as it really does help me out. And also, please remember, for every 1,000 subscribers that I get, we'll get a new community code for character shards, so just hit that sub button. So is Forcas the character the Dark Angels have been waiting for? Well, let's go through everything. Well, first of all, he has camouflage. Not sure how you can hide a whopping great big sword like that, but he manages to do it. So ideally, you really want to make sure that as he's advancing towards the enemy, keep him in that tall grass for the -3 hits. Of course, that's not so useful against people like Calandis who've got one big shot. And once he's in combat, he has parry, so the enemy will have one less hit against him there. Again, not so great if the enemy only has one hit. On top of that, he doesn't have any ranged attacks. He only has his power sword, which does have 6 hits, so that will come in very use in those LRE events where you need a minimum number of hits, or indeed power. The troubling thing about this character is he doesn't have an additional block chance, so that's one area where he doesn't really mesh as well with Azrael, and we'll look how he combines with all the others in a bit. And apart from his abilities, which we'll go through in a second, that's all there is to the character. So, as I said, let's have a look at those abilities. Let's start with his active ability, which is very much like Tangida's in a way, in the fact that it's got 2 modes which you can switch to any number of times you want throughout the battle, obviously only switching once per turn. You've got his strike stance, where at the end of his turn, Forcas starts overwatching, even if he's attacked this turn, which I will admit is very cool. And like Ray Vass and Immerspec, if he defeats a unit while overwatching, he remains in Overwatch. And again, like those 2 units, he will retain fewer hits compared to the previous attack. And the number of fewer hits will depend on the level that you get this skill. His secondary stance is the sweep stance, where Forcas' normal attacks also deal 3 lots of power damage to each enemy adjacent to both Forcas and the initial target. So you can always, if you switch to this stance, hit up to 3 units in any one turn, which is great for things like the legendary events, survival events, and of course the Guild War and tournament arenas. So these 2 modes for his active ability are very good. His passive ability means he'll do a percentage extra damage for each adjacent unit, and that's any unit. Normal enemies, summons, probably even a chest or a barrel, I would also imagine. And additionally, he gets an additional set amount of damage for each friendly Dark Angel. Now here, if you look across the various values, you're looking at maybe 33% increase. So he really does want to be paired with other Dark Angels. However, there's only certain Dark Angels he pairs very nicely with. He only gets part of the buff from Azrael for the Overwatch. He won't benefit from the extra block that Azrael gives. Sarkwell, on the other hand, admittedly there's no direct synergy here, beyond the fact that Sarkwell would hide behind this guy, and if someone charges into Forcas, Forcas will do Overwatch, Sarkwell will then do Overwatch. They attack Forcas here, and Sarkwell goes, "Oh, you've attacked a buddy of mine," and he'll shoot again. So that's kind of nice. There is obviously some really nice synergy with Asmodai because of Asmodai's Exemplar of Hate giving additional damage, and it's quite a substantial amount of damage for this round and the next for all friendly units against one particular enemy with melee or Overwatch attacks. And it's possible, by using this Exemplar of Hate, he'd actually call Forcas to attack, getting that bonus damage and doing a huge amount with those 6 attacks. So I can certainly see him pairing with Asmodai. And finally, Barakil. Again, there's no direct synergy here for the character either, beyond the fact that if Barakil's next to him, Forcas is obviously going to get that additional damage thanks to his passive ability. I wouldn't say this guy is really going to gel the Dark Angels together, and that is a huge shame. The Dark Angels, in my opinion now, aren't so much a faction that work together, but more the building blocks that you'd build a set team around. That's not necessarily a bad thing though, as it's still very useful to have for things such as guild raids and guild wars. So, let's have a look at this guy in action. As with all my tests, I like to see how well they fare from a crit shot from Calandis, and there's the crit and not much health left. So, as with many characters, not the best idea to run into those sniper shots. However, Forcas has an Overwatch shot of his own, and let's imagine this was the tournament arena where Kharn is quite often catapulted into your troops on the first turn. How well is this going to fare for Kharn now? There's one shot, two shots, and oh dear, Kharn now dies. So at least with the Dark Angels, you're no longer going to be fearing that. And for that alone, people might start to like this guy. Of course, that is only if he goes into base-based contact with Forcas. That was, of course, with all of the Dark Angels acting together. What if there's only Sarkwell within range? So we'll have Kharn charge in using his kill main burn, and he does manage to get it off, but does die as a response. So should we call that one even? And of course, finally, we've got to check with just Azrael. What happens here? So again, in we go with kill main burn, and again, a draw. Although Azrael does end up with more life than Sarkwell did. So if all three are there, you're not going to get in. If two, you will, but Kharn will die. But of course, you can avoid that by just not attacking Forcas. The next bit does require a bit of setting up, but obviously we're just here to see the numbers and see what actually happens. So if we select Forcas, we can see currently he'll do 279 damage to Kharn. If I move Azrael in, it will then jump up to 445. So that's pretty cool. Now, if we move Maladus in and switch back, that 445 has jumped up again to nearly 500 damage. So you can see it doesn't matter if it's enemies or friendlies that are in contact with him, the more that are around him, the deadlier he becomes in combat. The other cool thing is, if you look at him at the moment, you can tell which stance he's in. As he's got it rested on his shoulder, he's going to be doing his wide sweep attack. Now, if we go back into the other stance, he has it up ready, and you can see when he ends his turn, the Overwatch is there as well. So you've got two visual cues to let you know what sort of stance he's in. In that Overwatch stance, will he trigger things like the passive ability from Calandis? And as you can see, because it's that ability, Calandis's passive ability, the wire weave net, won't actually trigger, which means he stays on full health. And as we saw, he attacked and killed Calandis, so you can see the number of attacks has now dropped down to 4, so that when we put the next character in, he'll attack again, obviously not doing as much damage, and he's gone back up to 6, and he's lost the Overwatch. So if you really have to go into combat with this, you can possibly feed him summons to reduce the number of attacks, or just put someone very tanky in the first place who's not going to die. So overall, a very cool character. Is Forcas going to change any of the meta at all? Well, there is a chance that he might be integrated into the tournament arena. After all, if the only option is to charge your bomb Kharn into Forcas to do his thing, well, Forcas might have a word or two to say about that first. And when it comes to the faction tournament arena, are the Dark Angels now gelling enough to be a worthy team? And that's something I will look into the next time the faction tournament arena comes around, because I'm really not sure. However, Forcas is a massive upgrade from Incisors, I'll be honest. How about other areas? Guild raids. Could he be useful there? Well, his enmity for the unworthy does increase his damage, and he does have 6 attacks, so he could, in theory, go into those multi-attack teams. He's certainly going to be of use in the Legendary Raid events, and I can see he will definitely be included in your teams for the Guild Wars. So overall, I would say if you're looking to unlock this character, definitely make it a priority. He is actually quite a good Dark Angel to have. Whether it makes the whole team good to have or not, I don't think so. I really still think that the Dark Angels will be used piecemeal in other teams to make them worthwhile. I would certainly recommend the unlock if you can get it. And assuming you do, I would certainly recommend taking this character at least to Gold 1 because of his use in the legendary events. And then I need to have a lot more of a look at this guy to make sure he's useful in the guild raids. And I've got a funny feeling he might be if you haven't got some of the other key pieces already. Overall, I'm really glad that the Dark Angels have finally completed their faction, and it has indeed ended on a high. If you like these videos, then it would be much appreciated if you at least think about using my friend code, as it really does help me out. Or if you or your guilds are looking for a new home, please reach out to any of the guilds shown, as we'll always welcome new people into our midst. As always, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll be seeing you on the battlefield.